So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to be talking about who your inner voice is, where it all started, a teeny bit of the psychology. I won't go into massive detail because that's probably more my passion than everybody else's. How it develops, a very different perspective and different way of looking at it, which I hope is really going to help you, because for me, it was a total game changer. And this is what I utilize with my clients now. And I'm also going to be giving you 2 of my key strategies that I give to my clients to take away that you can start using today. And any of that information, if you want to pass it on to other people, then please do so. This isn't like a secret coven little group of only the people who attended can find out, or only the people who signed up. If there's anything in there that you think is going to be really useful, then please do feel free to share it, including particularly for you, Jill. You can share things with your staff. That's absolutely fine. Anything that kind of helps other people as well. My passion is about getting my messages about how I see things in a slightly different way from other people that have really helped me and others. My mission is to get that out to as many people as humanly possible. So that's really, really important. So let's kick off with a question for you guys, first of all, then. So my first question is, do you hear an inner voice? And do you recognize who that inner voice is? So it could be a person in your life that already exists. It could be a character that you've given your inner voice. It could be yourself. Who is it that you hear? If you can hear your inner voice, just pop it into the chat for me and I'll pick it up as we go. So sometimes the inner voice can be given a different name. Intuition is one of them. Although some people see intuition as like a gut reaction, like a physical reaction instead. Some people call it the inner critic, and I will just put a disclaimer up. I don't believe in the inner critic, and you will find out why today. Sarah Hughes says, it's yourself. I tell her to shut up and I call her Karen. Oh, Sarah, you're absolutely perfect for today then, because I'm going to give you a completely different point of view on that. Karina, it's yourself as well. And I think that's one of the issues. When we hear an inner critic or an inner voice that's ourselves, we go, well, it's me. I believe that. I believe that that is true, what is being said. And sometimes we want to push her away. Sometimes she is a bit of a Karen. That's absolutely fine. Emmanuel also says herself. Anybody else have, like, sometimes the voice I can hear in my head is my mother's. On the odd occasion when something comes up, I'm like, oh God. Or even worse, now my children are teenagers, they're 16 and 17 now, they will say to you, God, that was such a Gran-Ann thing to say, which is their name for my mum. And I'm like utterly horrified at that point. Me as a child and teachers at school. Yes, absolutely. I think it's easy to forget that sometimes other people who are in a position of giving us care when we were younger, people we looked up to, is not just our parents or our family. It also includes teachers. And an astonishing amount of my clients have a horrific story about something a teacher did or said that they've carried with them ever since they were little. So yeah, teachers are absolutely one as well. Okay, so what sort of things is your inner voice, your Karen, yourself, your teacher? What are they saying to you? What are they stopping you from doing? What are they saying isn't, that you're not all right at doing? What sort of things have we got? Oh, how exciting. I can see the waiting room and the chat at the same time. Who knew? Easily. Oh, Nina has a selection. Laura, I'm not good enough. You absolutely are, lovely, and I shall tell you exactly why in a moment. Laura, I'm just going to ask you to expand on that a little bit. Is there anything specific you can think of that you're not good enough for? You're not good enough to have something, or you're not good enough to be something? Give me a little bit more on that one, lovely. Okay, so when we are born, I'm going to be picking these up as I talk, but when we are born as the cleanest slate, highest version of ourselves. So when we're born, unless there is some difficulty that could be medical and what have you, we communicate very clearly what our needs are. We will cry, we will shout, we will yell at the top of our lungs whenever we need something. And we have different cries for different things. So we'll have a cry for when we're wet, when we're hungry, when we're uncomfortable, whatever it is. We communicate very clearly and we don't think about other people. There's no such thing as a baby thinking, oh, Mum might be a bit upset if I cry for my milk at midnight now, but yeah, maybe I'll leave it. There is no thought process. We know our needs and we communicate them fully. So actually, let me just pick up on a couple of these bits. So she tells me I'm not good enough to do, I'm not going to do well at a presentation at work or whatever else I'm worried about. Tells me I'm useless, not good enough, stupid, usually job related, or something goes wrong. Mine is directed at my physical appearance. Okay, all interesting stuff. We'll pick up those in a minute. So what happens is, after we are born, we start to have human interactions. So initially, usually with parents and siblings, if we have siblings. And then as we get older, then it's going to be peers. It's going to be, so children the same age as us, it's going to be teachers, it's going to be nursery workers, whoever else comes into our lives. By the time we are 7, those are where our patterns are starting. And it's our interactions with others that start our story, and it's our story that becomes our inner voice. So when you think about the people that you look up to, we thought our teachers and our parents and everything were always right. And it's almost like a rite of passage. You get to a certain age where you realize that not everything your parents say is absolutely right. And you start to kind of sort through the thoughts and feelings a little bit, but bearing in mind that your beliefs are created by the age of 7, and they are based on those person's viewpoints. They are based on that person's model of the world. So, for example, some of the fairly regular archetypal things that will come out will be things around money. So comments like, people like us don't have that. There'll be things about being too big-headed. So you don't need to talk to yourself, you know, in that conceited way. That's really arrogant when you're saying how good you are at this. And so all of our thoughts and feelings, they end up sort of being squashed. And I'm not saying every parent behaves like this, but there will be a throwaway comment that your parent has said, at least one that you will have held to being true. You will have decided that that is something true, because when we were young, people who were older than us, we automatically looked up to them. We thought they were ancient and we automatically looked up to them. They knew what they were doing. And the reason for that is something really deep rooted into us. It's tribal. If we didn't fit in, if we weren't accepted, we could be ousted. And being ousted basically was the difference between living or not a long time ago, but we still carry that innate programming into us now. So it's almost like a tribal thing that we still carry. And it's important to us that we think that our parents and everything are wrong, but their viewpoints, all of those people who we have the interactions with, their viewpoints are based on their view of society, their parental upbringing. Sometimes we can be, so for me, I didn't have the greatest relationship with my mum, and my upbringing, now I look back on it, and now that I'm a parent myself, was almost a book of how not to do it. So I've responded to a lot of my parents' beliefs by going, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. But other people will do the complete opposite. And some people will do a mixture of both, where they go, actually, that was a great part. And for some of it, my mum, absolutely, she was fantastic. And it's lovely to watch her being a grandparent now. But sometimes I do feel a bit sad that she wasn't like that when I was young. So she wasn't supportive. And I'll come on to a little bit more about that in a minute. So when you think about viewpoints that from when you're young, can you tell me anything in the chat that happened, that was said to you when you were young, that you carry with yourself now? Quite often they're around money, they're about how we feel about ourselves, they're about being arrogant, they're about people like us, those sorts of things. Is there anything that springs to mind when you think about that? I'm just going to pick up on some of the things that I've missed. So if I missed anything, the work isn't good enough to be mine. I never want to do anything. I have a good time, then I'm naughty. Okay. That I won't be as successful as not academic, passing the exams. And although I found my way in life and done well, this can hold me back and have huge fear of failure. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you've constantly been told, you know, don't set yourself up for a fall, or you won't be able to do that because you're not clever enough, or what have you, you know, you hold on to that. And that is a big deal. We can't afford it. Yep, absolutely. So we can't afford it then leads to a lack mentality. And a lack mentality about money can lead to a lack mentality about time as well. So anything that is considered a currency, you can have a lack mentality. So Jill, you may find that with the I can't afford it, you also have a sideline of I never have time. There's never enough time. I haven't got the time to do this, that, and the other, because the lack mentality leads to the same thing. Oh, yes, I want, never gets. Oh, how many people have said that to me? I can't believe I missed that standard one. But actually, I want, can get. But because we grow up with that, I want, never gets, it almost creates this feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to have that. If I want it really badly, I probably can't have it. And that, you know, really stands in the way of what we feel that we can achieve. So let's keep this part really, really simple. You get 70,000 pieces of information per second that goes into your brain. And that's a mixture of the things that you can see, the things that you can hear, the things that you can feel, the things that you can taste, and the things that you can smell. So a mixture of those all the time. And so our poor brains, they have a lot to compute. So what happens is that information comes in and it gets filtered down. It gets filtered down, and most of it you are not conscious of. Most of it is the things that you just do without even thinking about it. So anybody who's watched me on any of my lives or has seen any content will know that I use my hands a lot. But I don't think, right, I'm now going to move my hands here and there and everywhere. You know, it's just an unconscious thing that happens for me. I just feel it's a good way of sort of expressing how I'm feeling. So your conscious mind is focused on the things that you need to actually focus on. So things that you've learned, like walking, tying your shoelaces, what other examples? Driving, making a cup of tea, they're all in your unconscious mind. You don't now think about, right, I'm going to get the cup out and I'm going to move my right hand to the cupboard, hold the handle and lift it down. All of that becomes in your unconscious mind. But your conscious mind is about all the things that you are conscious of in the moment. So for example, you won't have been thinking about it, but if I say to you now, think about your bottom sitting on the seat, think about the position that your legs are in, think about the feeling of your left cuff, you know, then you become aware of them, then they become conscious. So a lot of things that we're doing sit in our unconscious mind, and it has a job. Your conscious mind has a set of jobs, but just to keep it simple for today, your unconscious mind just wants to keep you safe. It wants to protect your body. It sorts through your memories, and it represses things that it doesn't want to think about and it doesn't want to remember in order to protect you, in order to make sure that you are okay. So all of this inner programming is coming in and hitting you, and it's hitting you like white noise, like cafe music, like you kind of know it's there, but you don't always listen into it. But every so often you will tune in a little bit more because your brain will be going, oh, we recognize this song. And that's exactly what your unconscious mind is doing all of the time. It's taking all of these interactions that it's learned, it's taking all of these additional pieces of information and creating your inner story. And a lot of that is done by the age of 7. So by the time you are 7, you will know what normality looks like for you. Even if that is a really horrific situation, by 7, it's become your normality. That's all you're expecting. Then we have the other interactions that happen, and sometimes those things get tempered, but sometimes our programming takes over. Sometimes our unconscious programming takes over. If you hear a conscious thought, so if your mum says to you, oh, don't be stupid, you can't do that, for example, she might only say that once in your life, but you will hear it 10,000 times at least in your inner conscious mind. And if somebody keeps telling you the same thing 10,000 times, at some point that doubt is going to start creeping in. It's going to start creeping in and going, no, you can't do that. No, you're not good enough to do that. We don't get that. We don't do that. We won't put ourselves out there. We're not doing it. And then that's why you can have all of these shiny goals and never actually get to them. So let me give an example from my own situation and my own story. I'm an only child, and I had a golden childhood up until about the age of 9. My parents and me were like the 3 musketeers. We were a little team, and I was included in things. So we would have like these parties at my parents' house, and I would be able to stay up and say hello to everybody, and everybody made a fuss of me, and it was really lovely. We didn't have much money, but my mum made everything fun, so it didn't even seem to matter. But by the time I'd reached 9, we'd had some life events, 3 key life events that hit our family. And there started to be secrets, and there started to be things that I didn't know. And I started to feel very left out. And humans, if we don't know the full story, we fill in the gaps. And a good example of this is if you see somebody in town on the opposite side of the street and they don't acknowledge you when you call across hello, you can tell yourself all kinds of stories about that. Some of them might be kind, like, oh God, I hope they're okay, I must reach out and send a message later. But they could be, have I done something wrong? Why would they ignore me? Oh my God, maybe they ignored me, but I haven't done anything wrong. That's really outrageous. How dare they? And we start to fill in the gaps of these stories. And that's exactly what I did as a child. What we do as children is we fill in the gaps where we don't know them, which is why I always champion age-appropriate truths for children. So I then ended up being really confused. And so my immediate thought was not, gosh, my parents are handling these situations really poorly. Mine was, they don't love me. They're just tolerating me now. I'm not good enough to be part of that little team anymore. And that then I carried that with me. So I wasn't good enough for great grades at school. I wasn't good enough to get into the drama school that I wanted to. I wasn't good enough to have a supportive, loving relationship. So I then had a load of toxic relationships until this all spiraled out of all control into an abusive marriage that I left 14 years ago, and decided that I got to make a different story, that I didn't want my child, who was then 3, my son was 3 at the time, I didn't want him thinking that this is how life was. And I realized that I had a choice. So thinking about all of those things, can you see how each of those bits added up to a story of I'm not good enough that I then carried through into adulthood? Take a moment just to think about what is your story? What is the story that's going on for you? And how is it trying to keep, actually, no, I'll ask that question in a minute. What is your story meaning for you? What is it stopping you from doing? What would you like to be able to do that your story goes, we're not doing that? So here is the different perspective. You don't have an inner critic. You don't have an inner Karen. You don't have this thing that wants to attack you. What you do have is an inner child who is stuck. And everybody has one. There is no, she doesn't ever grow up. The best we can hope for is that she's quite happy and quiet. And that's when your inner voice will be quieter as well. So what I would like you to do is just to take a moment and close your eyes, invite you to close your eyes if you're happy to do so. When you think about how you are feeling about yourself, what happens if you imagine that that voice is your inner child, a child that you like? What happens when she says, you're not good enough to do that? What happens when she says, you're not clever enough to do that? What happens if you take the emotional intelligence of those thought processes and put them into the fact that they're coming from your stuck inner child? I'm just going to invite you to keep your eyes closed for a minute, have a think about that. And then when you're ready, I'd love for you to share in the chat, obviously with your eyes open, and let me know what your thoughts are. It's coming from a petulant, stroppy child who is name calling in the playground, which is very different from a person who just doesn't really like you very much. I'll pick up the others as they come through. So what we have now got is a situation where instead of treating that inner voice with complete and utter disdain that you don't want to have any part of, suddenly we have got a child in front of us. Suddenly we have got a child who is saying these horrible things, and poor behavior from children isn't because they're innately born naughty. It's usually because they are scared, frustrated, unable to communicate in an emotionally intelligent way. So, Karina, I'm going to pick up on yours. So if you've got this stroppy child who is name calling, she's probably not very happy. She's probably really struggling with something else herself. When my kids were younger, both of them were intermittently bullied at some point by a child at school. And I always taught my children that if you've got a child who is bullying others at school, it means that they're really unhappy. And actually, one of them was stealing Owen's lunch. And his solution for that, after I'd had that conversation, was so sweet. His solution was, Mummy, can we make extra lunch? So instead of her having to steal it from me, I can share it with her. I was like, oh, how sweet are you? But it changed his whole perspective about it. And instead of feeling like this meanie was trying to get at him, he was like, she's just really sad. And that really changed things for him, which I think is really useful to use now. Sarah, she's scared and needs gentle encouragement. Absolutely. If you take every single piece of information that your inner child is giving you, so every single information that you have said that inner voice is telling you, and get it to come from a child's perspective instead, see it as coming from a child's perspective, she's just scared. She's just worried and nervous. She just doesn't really want to be seen. She still wants to just fit in. So if you, so Karina, with your situation where it's about your physical appearance, you know, what she's scared of about you being seen, if you looked the way you wanted to look, if you, I don't know what it is that you want to change, but if you made a change, is she scared of being seen? Is she scared because mum said when I was younger, well, you don't want everybody looking at you, or what are you wearing? You know, people will stare or anything like that. In what way has she been shamed about standing out in the crowd? Is there something that you need to sit down and talk to her about to find out how you can potentially change this? So she's just trying to keep you safe, but how does this now tie into your desires and your dreams and your goals now? So somebody told me this really amazing analogy, which I absolutely love. So I'm stealing it and using it today. I want you to imagine that all of this programming and your unconscious mind is a really strong naval submarine. That naval submarine is going to go wherever it's going to go, whether you want it to or not. It's programmed. It's going that way. There's nothing you can do to turn it. You, in your conscious mind, are sitting in a little rowing boat, rowing towards your goals. But the problem is you're attached to the submarine. So your goal over there behind you that you're rowing towards, that might be a promotion. That might be moving to a different company. That might be being really successful. Whatever it is, if actually your programming is, we're not doing that, that's not happening, then you're not going to go anywhere. That's why you're not achieving your goals, is because you are so set on this particular pathway. And as a result of that, it's actually your inner child keeping you safe is not really doing you any favors. Keeping you safe means not moving towards your goals. Keeping you safe is about not being successful and standing out, because that means getting outside of our comfort zone. And our inner child, she doesn't want to do that. She is not remotely interested in being outside of her comfort zone. That's scary shit for her. She doesn't want to do that. She just wants to stay with what she knows in her little bit of normality, whether it's right for her or wrong for her. She doesn't give a monkeys. So give me some examples in the chat. How can you influence your inner child? Yeah, Nina, you've sent me a list of all of these things that you were kind of blamed for and things that happened when you were younger. And those are things that you will still carry with you now. So whenever you think that you are in that similar situation, your inner child is immediately going to say to you, well, you're just playing up, or you'll be blamed for that, or you don't want to do that because of this. And it's all about the safety element for you, and it doesn't feel safe. Okay, so whilst you're tapping those in, and I'm going to go back and pick up on some of those examples in a minute, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more about what I do. So I help women who are established in whatever career sector they want to be in. And I help them with the imposter syndrome element, which also then plays into this inner child element. And I teach women then to learn how to communicate with their inner child, to change the story, to actually get the things that they desire, to stop them from being held back from that, from their desires. And I teach them specific strategies and techniques that they can use for the rest of their lives, in order to help them feel mainly fulfilled, free, and to finally enjoy success. Like, we think that, oh, when I get this promotion, I'll be really happy, for example. But what happens when you get that promotion and actually you're still the scared person inside, because then you don't believe that you can do it? What happens if actually you can't enjoy the success that you have got because you're constantly battling with your inner voice, your inner child, because you haven't learned how to communicate with her, because you haven't learned how to reassure her and, yes, sometimes negotiate with her? You have got to be the parent of your inner child. And some days you don't want to do that. Some days you're like, I'm not up for this. It's hard work. I don't want to. But actually, through the techniques and strategies I teach you, you can start to overcome that. And you can start to then work through and out the other side. And even if that's not to achieve like this amazing promotion, how lovely would it be to be able to feel like, I am successful just as I am. I'm doing well just as I am. I finally feel good enough. And the vast majority of my clients will tell me that they have never felt good enough. One of the questions I always ask is, when has this started? And we pick away and we pick away and we pick away. And usually it's never been any different. They have never believed that they are good enough to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And that has a massive impact. And I know, because I've been there and done that, and am now achieving the things that I want to by unpicking my inner story and working through it. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the examples you were giving me. Give me 2 seconds. All right, so we got to who she was. Okay, so Laura's first example is not good enough. So it's now your inner child that's telling you not good enough. And that tells me that she's scared. She's scared to step up and out of her comfort zone, and that terrifies her. So for you, it's going to be looking at that reassurance element that actually it's fine. We can do this. We are good enough for this, and starting to evidence how that is the case. So she tells me I'm not going to do well at a presentation, Sarah, at work, or whatever else I'm worried about. Again, inner child, she's scared. She doesn't want you to stand up and do that presentation because people are going to be looking at her, and that is really scary for her. So maybe speak to her about how that's going to benefit you guys, how actually it's going to be quite exciting, and how we've got information to share that's really important. Have a think about specifically, Sarah, how you could reassure your child about a presentation being a good thing for you guys to be doing. Okay. Jill tells you I'm useless, not good enough, stupid, something job related, or if something goes wrong. So again, she is really scared. You're not useless. She's not useless, but she obviously feels that there is some issue lacking. Have a chat to her. And I know this sounds bonkers, but I'll talk you guys through it a little bit more. Have a chat to her. Just sit down with your journal, with that inner voice, and go, right, what is the problem? Because we're not really useless, are we? So what area is it that you feel that we're lacking, so that you can start to unpick what it is that you feel innately you're not good enough at. And she will start to tell you. Karina, we've discussed yours. Work isn't good enough to be mine. Oh, Nina, yes, this is going back to something, isn't it? So in terms of it's not good enough to be yours is going to be about celebrating your successes with her and saying to her, we did this today and that benefited us in this way, and that's a moment to celebrate, and get her used to celebrating every tiny thing that goes right. So it might be you've watched a webinar and you've got a nugget of new information that you can utilize, or you did a call with somebody and it went really, really well because you've made a new connection and what have you. All of those things, you need to celebrate those things and allow her to see what celebration looks like in life for you. Laura, you've got about not being successful as not academic, passing exams, although you've always found your way in life, this can hold you back and have huge fear of failure. So what I would do for that one, Laura, is to look at all of the evidence that you've got that despite not having what she deems as being competence, what have you got instead? What are the positive things that you've got instead that mean that that's not important? Because we all know those bits of paper, they are just a stepping stone to the next levels for us. It doesn't mean that we can't do other things. It's like saying, if an artist isn't successful at school, she must be crap at drawing. And obviously that's not the case. We all have different strengths, and school and academic achievements only are part of the story. Jill, we picked up on that one. I want never gets we picked up on that. Nina, we've picked up on that. Yes, Sarah, it's about not drawing attention to yourself. She doesn't want to draw attention to herself, your inner child. All of your inner children do not want to be the one who has to stand up. Imagine what it was like when you were little, if you had to stand up in front of the class. So, for example, we had to take it in turns to read out loud to the class. And one teacher we had took it to a whole new level where you didn't just sit there and read, you stood up and you read to the class. And I never, oh God, just terrifying. And I wouldn't be focusing on what the people before me were saying. I was just focusing on when it was going to be my turn. Okay. So, Karina, I'm just going to pick up on one that you said, which is don't be something you're not. So for you, I would suggest that you want to pick away as what are you not, so that you can work out where the reassurance needs to come in, that actually maybe you are those things. Okay, so we talked about who it's coming from, what she needs. With logic, say your inner child doesn't want me to do something. I can tell her we did X in the past and it wasn't that bad, or it went well. Absolutely, it's about changing that perspective for her. Your inner thoughts are her true beliefs. She's not lying to you. She's not making it up. This is genuinely how she feels. So her thoughts are valid. They're not necessarily factual. It doesn't mean that what she says is right. It's just how it feels to her. Struggling with confidence, needs reassurance. Absolutely. Reassurance, she's good enough. List the examples. And like you said, hold on. Yes, other people's perspective. Absolutely. Jill, I'll come back to that one. Okie dokie. So yeah, and some of it will be about expectations that were on you when you were younger as well. So there's all sorts of things coming into play. I know I'm giving you like a proper overview and a whistle-stop tour of this. And that's why when I wrote this talk originally, it was like 6 talks worth of stuff, because it's so interesting. I'm so passionate about this. And now I've completely lost where I got to on my notes. Bear with. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's about how you would speak to that child. So let's talk about that first, and then I'm going to give you another strategy. So really the best way to start this process off is to, on your own, because you will feel like a wally when you first do this. I'm not going to lie, because I certainly did, but now I have regular conversations with her. So you sit down with your journal somewhere quiet, somewhere where you're not going to get interrupted, preferably. And you speak out loud your conscious mind. So you are being you. You are the parent. You are the teacher. You are the queen of your world. You've got your shit together and you know what you're doing. And now you're having a conversation with this very scared, very unsure little girl. Little boy, if you are male and watching the replay. But it's a younger version of you, and she is scared. She's scared for a number of reasons. Firstly, I don't know anybody else who talks about the inner child as much as I do in terms of really treating her like a character. So the chances are you haven't really acknowledged or seen her or heard her as a child since you were a child. So she's been ignored for a really, really, really long time, not because you have been aware of her and maliciously ignored her, just because you're not aware of this as a thing. But if actually you then start to talk to her, at first, she's probably going to be a little bit reticent to give stuff up. So you sit down with your journal and you ask a question out loud. And I always start off with, sweetheart, I'm here to listen to you. What's going on about X? I'll always focus on a specific thing. Tell me about it. And sometimes it takes a little while, but I promise you, if you just sit and wait, whatever's coming into your head is coming from her. And you will start to be able to pick away what the real problems are that's stopping you from doing something. So you might say, right, I've got this presentation to do and I'm really nervous. Nobody else will know that I'm nervous, but I'd really like to not be utterly exhausted on the run up to it. So you sit down with her and you go, right, we've got this presentation. You're really nervous about it. You're really scared, and I get that. What's going on? What's the problem? And as you get more versed with this, like, please don't give up the first time that it's difficult and it doesn't work. Please keep doing it, because the more she goes, oh, actually, you are here to acknowledge me and you are here to listen, the more she'll give up. The more you can treat her like a real child, like a 3D child, 4D child in front of you, the better this will be. But talk to her and find out where the problems are. She wants reassurance more than anything. But I've also discovered she quite likes reward. So sometimes we have to do stuff that we don't want to do. And I was thinking about, right, okay, so I've got to do this thing. I don't actually want to do it. So it's not even about, I've got to reassure you that we do want to do it. I don't want to do it. So I've discovered that my inner child is quite easily rewarded. So rewarding myself for things that I've got to do that I don't necessarily want to do, or I know is going to be really uncomfortable. I will then say, right, if we do this, we can go and have an ice cream. If we do this, we can buy a magazine on the way home. If we do this, we're going to, and I know this sounds bonkers, but this is a treat for me. If I give myself time to go in the garden and do a bit of pruning in a day, that would make me feel good. She likes reward and reassurance, but I absolutely promise you that this works if you are willing to stick at it. If you are willing to treat her like the child who needs that reassurance, suddenly some of the things that you've got, that your inner voice is telling you, that she is telling you, they have a different perspective, and you can treat them with a lot more compassion than you were before. So Sarah, can we un-Karen your inner Sarah? Can she just become inner Sarah again? Do you think that that's going to be possible? Marvelous. That's really, really good. Okay, so give me some info, because I know that this is probably something that you haven't necessarily heard a lot about before. How are we doing? Where are we at in terms of this? How is it feeling, what I'm saying? And it is perfectly all right to say, this is bonkers and uncomfortable. What are you talking about, you mad women? Sarah, my lovely, can you pop yourself back on mute? Thank you. Yes, definitely more exploration, because I know how this must sound at first. I know that people will be like, really, what? But I've used this a lot with my clients, and they all find it really, really, really useful to have this different perspective, because it means that they come at it with a position of self-compassion. And when you think about how you speak to yourself sometimes, it's probably not how you would talk to a friend, let alone a child. So when you think about the things that you tell yourself, it is worth a thought to think, right, if I did this from a reassuring, compassionate, encouraging point of view, would that actually help me more than going, push it away? Because all really that you're doing when you push stuff away is you're pushing it down. You're pushing it down inside of you, and you have capacity. Like, there is a limit that you can get to. And if actually you are processing this as it goes along, going, okay, come on, let's have a chat. And actually, I'm terrible. Sometimes when things are going really well, I totally forget about this. And then I have to sort of get myself back in check again, because only too soon will she need to have a chat with me. Laura says, helpful, never thought to talk to her about it. Insightful and helpful to see how to change perspectives. I use a visualization. Oh, I love that, Karina. I use a visualization to get in contact with my inner child. I can give advice and kindness to others. I struggle with myself. So talk to the child that feel I can. Yeah, absolutely. So having that element of speaking to yourself in a really compassionate way, speaking to your child in a compassionate way. And this isn't about encouraging her to grow up. It's encouraging her to be content. Like, she will always be there no matter what. You can be 97 and she will still be your inner child. She doesn't grow. You don't teach her anything in terms of, you're not increasing her age or her emotional intelligence. You are simply helping to keep her contented, quiet, doing her colouring in the corner, whatever it is, however you want to see it. The less she is telling you stuff is wrong, the less she is kicking off and having a tantrum, the better and easier your life will be. And so that's really important. So my other strategy that I wanted to give you today, so that you had two really key things that you can go and do. So, Nina's just written, hard-hitting realizations, emotional realization, my thought and process. Absolutely. Your feelings and processes when you were young are what you can still carry with you today. Most of us do. It's about them being able to have that communication with that element of us in order to break it down. So the second thing is going back to this lack mentality. So this is something that, again, comes from childhood, and I thought it would tie in really, really nicely with what we're talking about today. So the reverse engineering element is so important. So if you made a list of all of the things you would like to be, have, and do, that is significantly more difficult to list than all of the things that you would quite like to drop, that you don't really like about yourself anymore. So reverse engineering is incredibly simple. You take a piece of paper, you fold it in half down the middle, and then on one side, you write down all of the things that you would like to stop being, doing, thinking, and feeling. So you might say, I no longer want to be anxious when I'm about to give a presentation. I don't want to be exhausted by my inner thought processes. I don't want to always focus on the negatives about myself. I don't want to focus on what goes wrong all of the time. And you make this list around down one side. And then on the other side of the paper, once you've got all of those out, like, you really have to work hard and utilize the question, and what else, until you are seriously scraping the bottom of the barrel. Only then can you go to the other side of the paper. And so let's say you've said, I want to stop being anxious when I'm doing presentations. Right, you think, right, what would I like instead? Okay, instead, I would like to feel calm and comfortable about the idea of speaking in front of other people. So instead of focusing on the what I want to let go of, you're focusing on the what you want to move towards. So the difference being, if you think about if you think about the thing you want to let go of as being a central point in a room, if you are always thinking about what you want to let go of, you're always looking at it. Really, what we want to do is turn our back on the thing we want to forget and walk away from it. And only by focusing on what we want instead can we take our focus off the thing we want to drop and actually walk towards the thing that we want. So whenever you feel like you've got a lack mentality, which is mostly around money, time, things like that, then it's about what you're working towards instead of what you're working away from. So lack mentality means you're always focusing on the problem. Abundant mentality means you're focusing on moving towards a solution. So reverse engineering is a really, really, really good way of thinking, right, I want to let go of these things. What do I want instead? And you focus on what you want instead. And you can then much more easily work out some action points for each of those. So you may well say, let's go back to the presentation thing. I don't want to feel anxious when I'm giving a presentation. I want to feel calm and comfortable when I'm giving a presentation. Right, how am I going to do that? Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I'm really well prepared. I'm going to make sure that I have some relaxation techniques I can do before I'm about to do the presentation. I'm going to focus on talking to my inner child to discuss any of the problems that she's got about you being seen. So she will sometimes come up with a memory. So she will say, oh, do you remember that time in class where you were reading to everybody and you mispronounced a word and the whole class laughed? She's the one who's going to remind you of the reasons why you are scared about that now. And that is the best route to finding what those things are. And you can say, okay, yeah, that was horrible. And I really didn't like that. And I can understand how it hurt us. But actually, we're a lot older now. I will make sure that I know what I'm saying. And actually, sometimes if we slip up in a presentation, it actually doesn't matter. We are just human and we might make a mistake. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm perimenopausal, and the amount of times that brain fog hits just at the wrong moment and a word or phrase that I want just disappears. I just own that now. Excuse me. A presentation doesn't need to be perfect. Point proven. It doesn't matter that I had to just take a drink of water because I was coughing. It doesn't matter. We all have our moments and we all have our things where stuff happens, and it's about taking the heat out of some of those a little bit more. Okay. So I hope that has been useful, lovely people. We've talked about who we think our inner voice is and who she actually is, where it all started, the psychology behind it, how it develops, a very different perspective and a strategy for today. Can you let me know in the chat what your thoughts were and also what your takeaway is from today? I'm just going to mute and cough for a sec. Hold on. So based on what I was saying earlier about how I help people, the only thing I'm going to ask you, lovelies, is if you are interested in that and you want to talk a little bit further, please do drop me a message either by email, which you'll have from the emails that you've had today, or alternatively send me a message on social media, and then do reach out to me and let's just have a chat and see kind of where that takes us. So a great start to the thinking around mindset and a different perspective to more exploration needed. I would love to hear more about that, Jill, as you get more into that conversation. My takeaway is we can help. Yes, absolutely, of course you can. And I certainly resonate with that, because when I was going through my own personal development journey, probably the big point that I started with was, oh, there's a choice. Oh, I can do something a little bit differently from how I've been doing it. I was very much up until, how old would I have been? 32. I just thought this is what you got given. I didn't realize, and I know maybe that sounds a bit naive, but I didn't realize that there was a choice. I certainly didn't realize that I had control over it. So the fact that actually you can help yourself and you can help your inner child just makes the whole situation so much more palatable to think, oh, actually there is something that I can do to make this change. And it really, really helps. And if you enjoyed this, every month when I do this monthly masterclass, I will be building on this. I will be building on this a little bit more. So every month I will do parts that are for people who haven't heard this bit before, but also to build on what we've talked about before and encourage people to sort of, you know, follow the series, if you like, really. So I'm hoping that I will see some of you again and haven't put you off with my slightly different perspective and what have you. But I do think it's really useful. I found it phenomenally useful. It's made a lot of changes for some really beautiful clients who are now starting to really enjoy their lives and feel a lot calmer and a lot happier in what they're doing, because they know that actually when they come up against a difficulty, how to deal with it and how to communicate with their inner child. A lot of guidance as to how to take care of my inner child and being more conscious as to where my inner thoughts are coming from. Absolutely. Absolutely. And now I'm hoping that that will result in you looking at those thoughts and exploring them with some curiosity rather than with frustration, in order to, you know, to think about where those inner thoughts are coming from and how you can influence how you feel about them as well. There's some frantic tapping away. Does the opposite of what we want instead have to be the opposite of the other side? I love psychology, just emotionally struggle with implementing. You could do your reverse engineering in steps. So Nina's just asking, when you do your reverse engineering, does it always have to be completely the opposite? So if you, I'm going to go back to the other thing where it says, I was doing the presentation example, and you would say instead that you want to be calm and comfortable giving a presentation. If that feels too far a stretch, then you can do your reverse engineering in steps. So you would go, right, at the moment, I'm terrified when it comes to doing a presentation. The next step I would like to reach is feeling less terrified, because the idea of feeling the complete opposite is too much for you at the moment. You can do it that way. I find it personally more powerful to do the exact opposite and how I could take action steps before towards that. But if you wanted to do it in stages of, this is like the next step that I believe could happen, then yes, you could absolutely do that. Whatever works for you and what you think is able to happen. Okay, lovely people, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for listening with interest.